Should you do a fixed indexed annuity to protect against downside stock market risk? Lots going on here. I'm getting this question a lot. I'm going to share with you one thing that is going to seem interesting, that would make sense to think about a fixed index annuity. I'm going to share with you why I'm not a big fan of them, generally speaking. But the more volatile, the better potential for the fixed index annuity. So let me just share with an example going back to, this is Dateline 1/28/2019 with Michael Edison and Robert Hubscher, which I'm a big fan of both. I know them. I've talked to them both, so big fans. First time, long time. All right, so what we're going to do, so just real quick, fixed index annuities, previously known as equity index annuities, is growing rapidly with sales of more than $60 billion. All right, the issue is that fixed index annuities protect against the downside. All right, so that's what they do. They have certain common features. They are governed in part by participation rate, the cap, and the surrender fees. All right, so we're just going to talk about the participation rate. So remember, if the S&P 500 goes up 100%, you'll get some amount of that participation. In the example I'm going to use, you're going to get 50% to show you the benefit of a volatile stock market relative to the fixed index annuity. All right, so let's go into this. This is interesting. All right, so basically what we're going to do is they're going to use a couple of studies here. We have studied two variants of real-world annuities, Athene Annuity and Life Company, in cooperation with the Nexus. In both cases, the index that is used is the S&P 500 without dividends. Always remember that. So I'm telling you, a lot of people say, the S&P 500 has returned 10% a year going back to 1926. Thus, the index annuity will guarantee me, well, not guarantee, will give me 5% a year, half of the 10% a year going back to 1926. But 40% of that 10% a year was from dividends, and the annuity doesn't use dividends. You got to start there first and foremost. I'm telling you, man, it's a big mistake if you're going to use compounded annual returns with dividends reinvested and think you're going to get half of that or a portion of that in your investments. You're not. So that's the first and foremost reason why I don't like them. All right, so what happens here? There are many fixed index annuities available. Yep. All right, so in the let's see. In the case what we call variant 1, the participation rate is 35%. All right, so they have a 35% participation rate in one example, and then they have a 65% participation rate in the second example. Why would anyone use the 35 over the 65? Because the 65% charges you a 1.5% annual fee, which comes out of the value of the account. All right. The annuity cannot be realized before the 12th year without paying a surrender charge, and the surrender charge is huge, 14.5% during the first year and declines thereafter. So 12 years before you got no surrender charge. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you two examples of how this works. I'm going to draw it on my whiteboard here. All right, so so here's how the annuity works. All right, suppose the participation rate is 50%. Consider two consecutive 2-year periods. And suppose in the first case, the index rises by 20% in each of the 2 periods. Therefore, it rises by 44% over the 4 years. So let me draw that out. So we're just using the S&P 500. All right, so we have $100,000, Pablo, times 1.2. That's the first 2-year increment, gives us $120,000 bucks. Then times 1.2 again, gets us $144,000. All right, so we have 2 increments because they're looking at each 2-year period of time in this case. So $100,000 at 20% compounded is $144,000 bucks. All right, but the problem is with the index annuity, let me get my thing here, is that it doesn't use the 4-year compounded, it uses each individual 2 years. So we have $100,000. You got 20% the first year, but you only get half that. All right. So the index went up by 20% the first year. You're only getting half that, so you're only getting 10%. 110. The next year is up another 20%. You get half that. All right. So the next year is up another 20%. You only get half that, so you're getting 10% on that, which puts you at 121. All right, but still, I mean, nothing wrong with that necessarily. But just remember, you're not getting compounded as the same way as the S&P 500. Each 2-year increment is its own return, again, without dividends. All right, So in that case, 100,000 grew to 144 in the S&P 500, grew to 121 in the index annuity. So you have a compounded rate of return of 10%. Now, no one's going to argue that. That's good. That's not so bad. However, the following example, let's read this. I'll draw it for you. All right. Now, suppose the index declines by 20% in the first 2-year time, and then it goes by 80% thereafter. All right. So in the next 2 years. So I'm going to draw this. So the index falls by 20%. All right, so the index falls by 20%. So now we're down to $80,000 in the S&P 500, and then it goes up by 80%. So the next 2-year increment, or the time, whatever the years are that they use, in this case it's every 2 years, it goes by 80%. Now we're at 144. So same 20% compounding over a 4-year time, or in this case, again, 2 increments. But now we're at 144. All right, so the $100,000 fell to 20% the first 2 years, and it grew by 80% the next 2 years. So now we're at 144. It's the exact same thing as a compounding interest as what we had before, whereas compounding by 20%. What happened to the fixed index annuity, though? This is interesting. So $100,000 minus 20%. We don't get any, because it's a loss, it's protected from the losses, we don't lose anything. So we're at $100,000 the first year. All right, so we're left with $100,000. We did not lose any money. The next year is up 80%, divided by 2. So because the next time frame is 80%, we get 50% of that. It's 1.4. It's 40%. So now we're at 140. And that's where volatility of fixed index annuities works like a charm, because now we're sitting at 140, which is pretty doggone close to what you had in the S&P 500, which is 144. Right there, volatility works like a charm in fixed index annuities. Now, lower returns don't work well, so we're just going to cut to the chase in the conclusion here. Let's see. The serious downsides. The first is the paper, you can't realize your value until year 12. That's not good. A second downside is that insurer reserves the right to change the participation rate or the annual fee or both as it desires within bounds state in the regulatory filing. Don't like that. All right. They're not securities, not regulated by the SEC, but the state insurance commissioners. Without doing any proper research, the buyer of a fixed index annuity does not know the commissions. All right. Let's see, he talks about a better alternative. He talks about bonds. I think the better alternative is just simply the Wellington Fund, frankly. But all right. For an investor whose utility function involves a very strong aversion to any loss of principal, accompanied by a desire to participate in any upside, some fixed index annuities could be good. If such an investor is advised by an advisor charging as much as 1%, that advisor could truly justify their fee by enabling their investor to engage in the bond plus option. I don't like that. So anyway, they're saying at the end of the day, if you're truly against any losses at all, the fixed index annuities could be a thing. Now, what he says is, at the end of the day, is that it's, hold on a sec. Let's look at a study by Ibbotson, I think Roger Ibbotson over at, I think he's a professor of finance at Yale or something like that, who did a study on fixed index annuities. Over the 90 years of history using that study, the average annual return on stocks was 10%, and the result was the fixed index annuities average return exceeded the average return on bonds by a small margin, about 0.5%. All right. In present day, however, with future expected returns on stocks assumed to be lower than the historical average, we're using 8%. All right. So basically, this is what we're using with an 8. If you're going to get a lower rate of return, future projected return on stocks, this will make the fixed index annuities a harder to, it's just a worse product. Let's see. The assumption is complicated by the fact that the 10% historical average return on stocks reported on the Ibbotson study is a geometric average, historical returns, while the expected returns using simulations is a arithmetic average, arithmetic average on all possible returns. Since the expected return, the arithmetic, is higher than the corresponding long-term geometric return, this argument for using lower expected return than 10% may or may not be correct. That's fine. It's reasonable to conclude that the average anticipated return on the fixed index annuity may at least be on par with the anticipated return on a high-grade 12-year corporate bond. The FIA, in the meantime, avoids all downside risk if it's held into its 12-year period. The risk avoidance is only of a minimal risk, though, because if you look at high-grade corporate bonds, they don't go down in value very often. All right, so at the end of the day, and again, the historical 10% rate of return, does that include dividends? I don't think it does. But it doesn't matter, man. If you're going to get lower rates of return and lower volatility, I just don't think the fixed index annuity is worth it. I just don't. If you're absolutely against any portfolio losses, you're willing to lock up your money for a long period of time, and you expect high volatility, the FIA may work well, but I'm just not a fan. The 12-year time frame is tough, and I frankly can't recommend that for sure. But that's up to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We'll see you.